There we go. Hi, everybody. So nice to see you all today. Welcome to the Posit Enterprise Community Meetup. This is our last meetup of the year, and I don't know how the year went by so fast. I'm Rachel, and I lead our customer community here at Posit. Welcome to the meetup. This is a friendly and open environment for teams to share use cases, teach lessons learned, and just meet each other and ask questions. If you've joined us here at the meetup before, maybe put a 2 into the YouTube chat. If this is your first time joining, special welcome to you. Put a 1 in the chat. For those who have been here before, I encourage you to help welcome everybody in over in the YouTube chat as well. Together, we're all dedicated to making this space inclusive and open for everyone, no matter your experience, history, or background. During the event, we will certainly have time for Q&A, so you're able to ask questions on YouTube Live and also anonymously through Slido, which I'll share on the screen here in just a second. There we go. So you can use that Slido link there to ask questions anonymously, but also for some of the questions that we'll have during the presentation. I actually did just put a poll over there to start with. And I just wanted to ask everybody, do you deploy your own APIs today, to just get a feel for where everybody's at? So if you want to jump over there to the Slido, it's just posit.it/meetup-question. And our team can put in the chat too. I know Davis, our presenter, has a few questions for you that we'll show through Slido as well. To address one of the popular up front, yes, the recording will be available, and it will actually be ready as the presentation ends, the exact same YouTube link. But with all of that said, thank you so much for joining us here today. I am so excited to have Davis DeRodes here, Director of Data Science at the Looma project at Looma, whose work focuses on the intersection of human-centric content and sales. Davis's focuses are full stack data science, causal inference, data quality, explainability, and R. And Davis, I will pull you up here onto our virtual stage. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. Really appreciate it. Also, thanks everyone commenting in the chat and deciding to come here. I know holiday times are around and things are hectic, so it means a lot to come and have some fun together. Also, I heard this last one of the year, so hopefully we end out on a high note. So I'll just dive right in. Again, I'm Davis DeRodes. I'm the Director of Data Science here at Looma. I am a small data science team leader, so it's just me, a senior data scientist, and a senior analytics engineer. So a pretty small team. So if there are questions later or discussion topics later for small team data science, I'm all game for that too. But at first, we're going to discuss the main topic at hand, which is APIs. So the title I came up with for this talk is Why I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the API, which, for those who don't know, is a joke or a pun from the Peter Sellers Stanley Kubrick film, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Again, I always love a good pun and good wordplay. However, the real point I was trying to get at was APIs are the bomb. They're great. They're fantastic. In my data science journey, I definitely started more in the stats kind of experimentation realm. It kind of became more data engineering back end focused. And definitely in my earlier data science experiences, APIs were always a hassle. Someone's like, oh, the data's in an API. I was like, oh, please no. It was always an annoying thing to query and to get the data from and to structure it properly. It was just really annoying. The tools were really annoying. I was using the time as well. And also the other side of the coin too is deploying APIs. I've always found super annoying as well with Docker and all the headache around that. And normally, even in my classes, we wouldn't even deploy the API someplace. It would just be creating the API and just like letting it host locally. So again, I'm very much now a big fan of APIs, especially my current work at Looma. I feel like I use them all the time, and I just want everyone to kind of feel the joy, especially if you're on the more statsy side of data science with APIs. So let's dive right in. Before I kind of go into the main kind of elements of this talk, I do want to give some background of kind of what we do at Looma. So Looma is a retail media startup located in Durham, North Carolina, which is where I'm at. And we seek to be the leader in human-centric point-of-decision content and distribution. What that looks like today is, if you can see in the kind of image in the back, it's our product called Loop, which is a network of tablets and grocery retailers. So basically tablets, in your local, we're in Harris Teeter, for example, in your local grocery store, playing content related to the products that are on the shelf. So here you can see that this tablet is mounted on a beer cooler and it's playing films about the beers that are in that cooler. And those films are very human-centric, right? So they're about the people who made the beer, the stories behind the products and the people who enjoy them. So that is what Looma is. And the data science team is really trying to optimize Loop and then also kind of evaluate how efficacious it is. Is that a word? Hope it is. So with that, that's the background on Looma. I have a couple examples from Looma. I have a couple examples not from Looma, but I just want to give that background just for kind of what I'm working on currently and also some of the examples that come later. Now, I know we have a couple polls going, but the first kind of question I want to ask to folks is, how annoying is it to pull and store data from APIs? So if someone's like, hey, got this data for you, it's in this API, and you need to have it consistently in your data ecosystem, how annoying from like a scale of 1 to 5, or I'm not sure what the metrics we created were, but do you find that?
So I see we had 20 people answer the last question that I put up first. So I'll wait till I see at least 20 in here now. But I just put that link onto the chat here too. It looks like we're seeing kind of annoying is starting to win here.
That would have been my guess, kind of annoying. Ugh, the worst is a pretty strong sentiment.
There is an the worst that just came in too. Let's see. I hope everybody can see these answers too. If not, I'll make them show.
I have a good feeling that ugh, the worst might be my wife. She's
okay. Kind of annoying is still taking the lead. 56% of people have said kind of annoying.
All right, fantastic, great. That's also great to hear. I would personally answer that question someplace between pleasant and delightful. So hopefully the stuff I'm going to discuss later will hopefully maybe shine some light to maybe a more positive experience possibly. And the second question I want to ask too, which given by that response, I'm assuming this one and the first question that Rachel asked is, how easy is it to create and deploy an API? Which I believe, Rachel, correct me around the first question, most folks do not deploy an API currently. Is that correct?
Yes. So the first question I asked in the intro, yes, a lot of people haven't yet deployed an API. But I'm seeing right now for how easy is it to create and deploy, we're going from the worst. Now we're jumping over to no opinion, 50%. It's changing very quickly here.
Got it.
We'll give a second, one more second here. Okay, we're topping out at 50% for the no opinion. Others skewing towards the worst or kind of annoying.
That is great to hear. So hopefully throughout this talk, this will be a hopefully useful, helpful talk to hopefully move you at least out of ugh and kind of annoying to either no opinion or maybe even pleasant. For creating and deploying APIs with Posit Connect, I'm at delightful. I probably create too many APIs now. If you ask my team, it's APIs and Slack bots are the two things folks tell me I make too much of. So our agenda today for the rest of the talk, I divided into 3 sections. First is querying external APIs, so just basic calling REST APIs. Best practices for me, at least, for exploring, formatting, and organizing those queries, and also productionalizing those extractions to put it into your data environment using Posit Connect, and also a really great workflow that leverages the exploration, the formatting you did in the first step. The second section is going to be on functional API request generation with R. Basically, a bunch of fun use cases for if there's folks in your company doing things manually in other systems that there's an API and you see the right query to create the thing they're doing and automate that. You can do that with Posit Connect. And I'm going to show you guys a really cool example with something that we call Score at Looma regarding evaluating the films that we create with Typeform. And also integrates with Slack as well. So if you're interested in Slack, interested in Typeform, hopefully you'll see how this really cool thing we built and hopefully it will inspire some of your own projects. And the last thing is creating and deploying APIs with Posit Connect. Just that last question we just asked you guys, right? Of both sharing data externally, a great use case for APIs. If you have technical external stakeholders, there's probably no better way to share data than with an API. And then also ingesting data. So if you need to bring in data from folks, APIs are also a great way to do that well, especially with external technical stakeholders, and also even sharing and ingesting data with technical internal stakeholders. So if you have an engineering team and you need to send data over to them to populate in a front end, an API is probably the preferred way to do it, honestly. So let's dive into that first one, though, before we get too far ahead. With the creating external APIs. And just a quick background, too, just for folks who are really unfamiliar with APIs, which it didn't seem too many folks didn't know what an API was, but there's a great article that I have kind of cited here below regarding kind of the framework of what is an API, which a great metaphor I've heard is an API is a waiter. So you, the requester, are like the customer at the restaurant, if you will. And then the API is the waiter, and the recipient is the kitchen, right? So you could be like, I like a ham sandwich, right? The API takes that to the recipient and then brings you back hopefully a ham sandwich, or tells you, hey, we're out of ham, or you asked for ham the wrong way, or something along those lines. So that's kind of a really great metaphor I like. The thing is, too, is that things on your side can change. So, for example, your backend can change. For example, like you create a new table, but as long as you're matching the same schema or matching the API format the same way, if you're the recipient, for example, it's all good. So the API is that really great middle point to translate the needs of your requesters and what you have on your backend. And a joke I like to make, too, is that also occasionally you can have a mean recipient, right, like Gordon Ramsay, who tells you don't have permission and you're unauthorized. Keeping it light, guys. Last one of the year. So I'm going to do a quick demo of kind of my workflow personally, and what I think is a really great workflow for exploring API requests. So I'm going to share my screen. Oops, wrong. Share.
I'll pull it over in just a second there.
Yeah,
too.
I
there
should
you
have
go.
pressed the share button. It would have been all fine if I didn't touch anything. Hopefully, all y'all can see my R terminal currently.
Looks good.
So first thing I'm going to do is library tidyverse, of course, as all great R scripts start with. And there's a link I would love for y'all to see in GitHub regarding just like a list of just free APIs out there. It's a really fun list of just free data out there that you can pull from the API, these various APIs. One I did find on that list was this aviation API. I know nothing about planes, so maybe this is a really terrible example, but it is completely free. It's also, there's no Gordon Ramsay. No one's going to tell you you're not authenticated. So it's a completely public API for you to get data regarding airports. So normally when you go to an API, you'll see some amount of documentation. And this, for me, is very run-of-the-mill for API documentation. There's also a lot of standard like wrappers around APIs that just auto-generate the documentation. And this is one of the ones I've seen pretty frequently. Text is a bit fuzzy. I'm trying ++. Hopefully that's better. So you can see here in this API, true. Okay, well, hopefully it's better. I'll zoom in on the R, but basically you'll see these different URL requests for the function. So you see right here, right? This is a GET request for all the charts for a specific airport, and you can get the server URL here. So this is basically going to be the main thing you want to basically query the API or get a response from the API. So we're going to take this, right, and we're going to bring it back to our API call here. You can just put it in here. And then we need to specify which airport we want to do. So here you see the query parameters. And with a standard, just like REST API, fantastic. With a standard REST API, you're just going to add a question mark, the parameter name, and then $, and then whatever you want to put in. So as I mentioned before, I'm in the Raleigh-Durham area, so I picked our local airport, RDU. And then when you run this, you're gonna get that. And the main package we're gonna be leveraging for running API requests is this HTTR package here. And when you get back, is gonna be a lot of gobbledygook. Like, this is not very helpful. It's a lot of the headers, whether the response was 200, which means it was accepted. If you get a 403, Gordon Ramsay, that means it was forbidden and you're not authenticated properly. If it's a 404, that means it was not responsive, which is really weird. So hopefully you get 200s, but this isn't very helpful for us. The magic function you're going to want to use is this HTTR content, which is going to extract the content from that response you got. So now if I look at the actual content, okay, KRDU, that's the airport code for Raleigh. And then we get a beautiful list in RStudio to explore. And for me, this is really great UI, in my opinion, because you can just go through here and look, okay, this is around the right structure, right? This is looking good. All right. We can do one more step further, which is we can put it in a tabular format. So there's one of two ways to do this. I'll show you guys the first way to do it, which is if everything is really flat, so there's no nested lists or anything, you can just use map DFR and just get tabular data from the API, just like that. I'm guessing these are charts. These are PDFs we can pull up. I think that's what this data source is. But that is one way to do it, just right there. Similarly, this is weather. So this is a little bit more complicated one. So if I go to the API, I think weather was over here. Yep. So I went over here. I get the server URL here. And again, this should be pretty standard in most of the API documentation you'll see. Just bring that over. If I'm at our terminal, over here, and then it had the parameter of the airport code again, so put it here. So I'm gonna get that response. It's gonna give me something pretty gobbledygooky, but then I want that content. And then we have here the same different data, right, for a different request. So this is for the airport weather, I'm guessing. And the one thing I want to show you here is that these are normally JSONs that are coming back, and they can have nested structures, as a lot of JSONs do. And you see here, the sky conditions has this nested aspect here. So if we do map DFR, it's going to come out weird, and we don't want to do that. So another way to do this, and this is the way I do it with complicated queries, is I start by just making the weather content a table. And you see here, it's just going to most likely be just like a one row, one column list inside of a table. And we're just going to unnest it wider. And we're going to get, something that looks pretty normal. But we still have this nested list here in the sky conditions. But as any Tidyverse Pro knows, you can just do more per functions to get to what you want. And now we have two different rows here, one for each of the different sky conditions we had, that base AGL, I'm not sure what that is, and also the category. So yeah, so this is really basic how I personally explore APIs in RStudio. I personally think RStudio is a really great place to explore APIs. If we could go back to the slides, please. Awesome, thanks. All right, got to get to move the slide. There we go. So just to show kind of comparison, like the RStudio experience, I put R experience, but really RStudio experience on the left is just so much better than from the experiences I've had running in other environments. So for example, that's just my terminal, right? You just get this long JSON. You don't know what's what. It's kind of complicated to look at versus this is something you can go through all the objects and see the structure really clearly. So personally, RStudio is my favorite tool for exploring APIs. So, okay, so now you've done your exploration, you know what you want. All right, so what's next? I recommend structuring your kind of API queries. So for when you're just getting data in two types of functions. So for one, query generation. So first, just a function to just generate the query that you're going to want to run, or the request you're going to want to run, and just a function up top. This is really helpful too for debugging, especially if you're using non-REST APIs. So for example, our team has an internal PostgreSQL API that sits on top of Postgres database sits on top of a GraphQL API. That's it. Got my QLs confused. GraphQL API. In which case, those queries are much more complicated. They're much longer, and it's really nice to be able to easily just run a query, run a function, get the query, and send it over to them for them to help me debug. And also just useful to just have it to run in a terminal or send it to someone else. The second type of function is to format the output for what you actually want. So just actually getting the weather response, in this case, in the format that we want. So that includes running the API call, extracting the content, and then formatting it using Tidyverse functions. And then so if you see the bottom, that's an example. And then now with this functionalized, I can run it for any airport I want. For example, the Atlanta airport, which is where my family lives. So now you have functions to get the API request you want. Great. So what's next? Next is productionalizing that and getting it into your data ecosystem. So as always, our packages are fantastic. So absolutely make a package including all your functions, all those query and get functions. I think are really great. Make an RMD or a Quarto with all the basically things you want to run and ingest. I recommend publishing it on Posit Connect and scheduling its generation. And then you can get the email notifications from Posit Connect, or you can add a Slack bot. I love the Slacker package. I probably have way too many Slack bots on our team. But then you can get a nice little message every morning letting you know that, hey, the ingestion went through. And like you got your data in your warehouse properly. So this is like a positive message that I get at 7 a.m. every morning. And you can also see what the RMD looks like. So for example, we're ingesting all of our film metadata, all of our products, all of our brands, all of our device slots, etc. But also nice thing too is when things go wrong, I can start my morning off with messaging my engineers being like, hey, did something change in the API that made things wrong. The whole purpose of an API is that hopefully is static. So especially for public and like really big companies, like hopefully it doesn't change unless there's a large version switch. However, it is really good to know when APIs do change, especially internally, so you can surface that to those teams. Great. Next is dynamic external API posting with R. In our example, I'm going to flag as our score typeform surveys. So the background for this score typeform project was we need to send surveys internally asking employees to watch and review different films. We needed a UI to upload and manage those films, a click button kind of solution for folks to generate a typeform survey, and then also send it out to everyone via Slack. And then also ability for users to say, I'm busy, I can't review this film right now, and decline it. And we were able to do a large majority of this project with just Shiny and APIs and Plumber APIs and also just Typeform Slack APIs as well. So we see here those three main kind of functions I was discussing. So first, uploading a film that was also used APIs, the Vimeo API. So all that involved was having a button to upload it into Shiny. We've all seen that before. A button, like an action button, basically, to then send it to the Google Cloud bucket, and then a call to the Vimeo API, which has functionality to pull it from the Google Cloud bucket. And again, all that inside Shiny. So really press a button, upload the film, push it to Vimeo, which is really useful UI. The second thing, cool feature, was sending out surveys. So basically, okay, we have the film in our environment. We have the Vimeo link for it. Now we need to send surveys out to folks. So basically pressing a button, it's going to post Typeform, send an API call to Typeform and post a new Typeform basically for all the questions that folks need to answer regarding the film. It's also going to embed the Vimeo link that we created in step 1 in all the different slides. We're going to write that metadata about where that survey is located into BigQuery. We're a GCP stack too. So if you're using Amazon Redshift, for example, or other backends, just swap it out with your Amazon equivalent. And then 3, we then send a post request to the Slack API to send out a message to everyone who we asked to score the film. And the last thing is basically folks being able to like confirm that like, yes, I'll score this, or no, I'm too busy. And that is the confirm survey acceptance step. So first, we actually created an API using Posit Connect and Plumber to take in a response from the Slack app, so that when you press yes on the Slack bot, it then sends a message to our Plumber API hosted on Posit Connect. And then that does 2 things. It writes the response to BigQuery, and then notifies the score back in Slack that it was accepted or declined. That all uses an API. So I want to show you guys first. We're going to skip the first one because it's pretty boring and more about Vimeo. But the second one I want to show y'all, which is sending out the surveys using our tool. So I just want to show you guys the kind of main kind of problem we're solving here with that second step is that creating Typeform manually can take like a super long time, right? Basically, right, it's folks, going through every single slide, re-linking that Vimeo link. It would take forever and wouldn't even be possible really for human purposes. Also, I'm not sure if you guys ever used Typeform before, but it's a lot of drag and drop, click and stuff. So if you have really complicated logic or other complicated needs in your Typeform, you really wouldn't be able to do it feasibly at scale, for like human creation, basically. So R and Studio Connect, Posit Connect, and also just RStudio is a great way to basically automate that kind of survey generation process. And basically the code behind this, I'm going to show actually a demo right now. If we could switch over to the screen. Awesome. So this is the story scoring hub here.
And I just need to zoom in a tiny bit.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Nice. So I'm going to go to this brand here. So this is a brand we work with, and this is a film that we made. And we're basically going to select some people that we'd like to score the film. So I'm going to pick myself. And I'm going to pick my analytics engineer and my data scientist. And then this is all in Shiny. I'm going to press this button, which is going to send me a notification on Slack with a deadline for me to score this film. Okay. And if I go to Slack, you'll see, and yes, this is Martin Scorsese photoshopped on top of Thor, the God of Thunder, giving me a message saying, hey, we'd like you to score this film here. And it's saying I can accept or decline, and it has a link to the Typeform, which was just created with that API, with the film that would like me to watch on every single tab. So having a human actually go through and add this link to every single tab is just not doable. However, with the Typeform API and just APIs as a whole, you can create that process right there. And again, this is all, as I showed you in the earlier architecture diagram, there's really nothing else really involved besides external APIs and Shiny and R. But just to kind of circle the loop a little bit, I'm going to press accept here because I'm a good employee. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to get a message back saying, thanks. I guess I clicked twice. Thanks. Do you mark you down as accepting this scoring request? Please complete the survey as soon as you're able. Which is great. If we can, Rachel, go back to the slides, please. And so the code really behind what I just did, the posting the request to the Typeform API and creating that survey, was really, that code block there is a really important one. And it's just using your favorite paste function, either paste or glue or whatever, and basically just copying and splicing that Vimeo film link with the standard API request needed to generate that survey on Typeform. All right, now we're gonna move to the third section. As soon as I can get this to move. All right. That was a score demo. I went a little early. All right. And then now we're going to show you guys creating and deploying APIs with Posit Connect, which I would put delightful. I think the way Posit Connect has created the infrastructure for deploying Plumber APIs, it's click button easy. I just want to share that kind of joy. So first, I'm going to go over this kind of one use case of receiving data, just to kind of circle the loop on the score thing. So as you guys saw, when I press that accept button, there's a Slack app function, which I can show you on this next slide, called interactivity. So basically, I put our API here with this hyperparameter of payload here, very similar to what I showed you guys before. This is something I have deployed on Posit Connect. And basically, when I clicked yes on that app in Slack, it basically ran that API request with the payload of he accepted, right? And then I just have our code running in the background to basically do all the things it needs to, update the metadata in BigQuery, and then also send that thank you message back. So that's generally how it works. And it's very simple, as you see down here, just a one function API, basically one function, one request API. What I do want to show you guys, those to kind of circle the loop of what that means is, after I ran that, I did it again. After I ran,
gotta trust me, Davis. I promise I'll
trust you. Before this said score response status none, but now it says accepted because I pressed the accept button on the app. It went to our API, and then it updated BigQuery, and it also send another request to the API, the Slack API, to send me a message. Yeah, so that's the main thing here. If we go back to the slides. That was score demo. I had these folders here. All right, but the main event though is actually showing how to deploy. Hey Davis, these APIs are really cool. Can you show me how to deploy and make one? And absolutely. So this is, see, if I literally did nothing, it would have worked out absolutely perfectly. Fantastic. Okay, so you see here, this is a Plumber R script. For those who haven't made one, it's really easy to get started in RStudio. There's literally a plus Plumber API. When you click that, it'll just make a new one for you. You'll get something that looks pretty similar to this. All you need to do is load in your libraries that you would use for this function. So for me, it's Plumber, Loom Lighter, and then, as I mentioned before, we're a GCP stack on the back end, so a big R query. And then here, you just put your different functions you want for your API. So for here, I have two functions, or two requests. So first is a get request for my pizza rankings. And it's just like R function. So you just write your normal R function down here. So here it doesn't take any parameters, right? I just want to give this list of a data frame of pizza rankings. These also are all real pizza places in Durham, and this is my official ranking. So definitely highly recommend Hutchins Garage for pizza. And the second one, which is much more exciting, is, and by the way, this is a really simple remedial example, but if you have external or internal technical stakeholders who need data that's in your data ecosystem consistently, this is a great way to share it, because I can change the source of this. I can make this a BigQuery table, but as long as it's returning pizza rankings and restaurant and ranking here in some format, then it's all good, and my downstream users are not going to be impacted. So that's the real importance of an API, is that if you are sending people technical stakeholders, right? Because yeah, the business stakeholder isn't going to be able to use an API. We're not trying to solve that problem. But if you're working with other technical teams that need data in your environment, this is the way to do it, and it's really easy. I'll show you how how easy it is to deploy in just a couple seconds. And the other thing too is a fun interactive thing I want to close out today with, which is I want to know where everyone's coming in from today. I saw people from, I think, Brazil I saw earlier, Italy. So I want to see where everyone's coming from, both in the United States and also out. So I'm going to ask you guys if you're willing to submit an API request to kind of tell me where you're coming from. So this is the other kind of side too, is that you can get data in too from other technical stakeholders. So I'll show you guys kind of the query, so not left too far out. But as you see here, I'm just doing a little bit of checking here to make sure that folks' responses are expected, and just basically telling folks like, please characters, please just 2 character strings. Yeah, hey Igor, how you doing? I saw Igor's comment earlier. Then submit data frame, right? So I'm just making a data frame. And then I'm just writing, these are internal functions in our internal package, just right to our BigQuery environment. And it's just that easy. Oh, I can a lot of answers. Well, submit it to the API. So if you want to see how it looks locally, you can press this play API button, and you can test it out locally. And you also just get all the documentation right here. So I can try out this function here, my pizza rankings. I can see here, if you run this request locally, you'll get this JSON with my pizza rankings. And then if you go down here, I can submit, I'm going to submit one on behalf of my dog. His name's Theodore. Probably the last name. North Carolina, one in the United States, and execute. And you'll see here, you'll get a response saying, thanks for your response. And the database will be updated with Theodore's response. So, okay, that's great, Davis. You got the API working locally. It was really easy. But how do you get to Posit Connect? Just like you do anything else. Press the publish button. That's going to do all its package dependency magic. And it's going to deploy on Posit Connect. Presto. And it's live. So now, folks, if you want to submit your poll submissions, I'd love to. And on top of it, too, I made a little dashboard just in our Markdown. So I already submitted. If I refresh this, we're going to see you're going to see a second submission. That was just my submission. Yeah, and you get the raw responses, right? You're going to see me and my dog. I think my wife's watching. I'm going to be clear. I know I mentioned I have a wife. I'm pretty sure she's watching, so I want to make sure she can submit. I do not love the dog more than the wife. That is very true.
Anyway, Davis, I want to make sure that I am sharing with everybody too. Can you share the link to me?
Yes,
to
yes.
The API?
Actually, if you go back to the PowerPoint.
Okay. 1 second. Sorry.
All good.
There we go.
If we go back, I actually have the code here, and if someone could share the actual code, that'd be awesome. Yep. So if you do want the less good terminal example, you can use that terminal code up there. So if you're a Mac user, just open up terminal. If you're cool, highly recommend using Warp as a terminal editor. You can throw it in there. And then if R, you just run that R code down there and just swap out the parameters with your information, and you'll be able to submit. And then on the next page is the pizza rankings. Probably less important if you don't live in the Durham area. However, they do exist.
Does this look okay for me sharing these into the chat here?
We'll find out. If I wanted to make that Flex dashboard live, I could have just made the Shiny running Shiny on Flex dashboard, and then that way it would be actually pulling the BigQuery every single time instead of having to rerun the report. But sometimes running static reports is nicer. It's easier to get together.
And Davis, I was just curious. So those links that we shared, where it's the terminal and for R, is there a way to share that with somebody? Like, what's the best way to share that with someone as technical?
Honestly, I wouldn't share it with someone. That's a great question.
Okay.
I wouldn't share it with someone not as technical. Yeah. This is kind of a fun example of what you can do with APIs just conceptually. However, yeah, like for the business stakeholders that I personally work with, I wouldn't have them working in terminal or R. I would be creating other ways like Shiny dashboards. Don't click on the link. You want to run the code either in R or in curl.
Would you be able to show us how we do that? Sorry, yeah, I'm sure. Going off script here. So
no, all good.
Okay.
Thank you, Aaron. All right, yeah. So let me see if I can copy it from here. If it is better, can I comment in the chat?
If you can't put it in the chat, you can put it in the private chat for us, and I can copy.
But basically, if I just take this and I open up my Mac terminal, for example. Yeah, that probably would have been a better idea to have it on GitHub earlier. I want to submit again. I'll submit again, whatever. Yep. So just thank you, Tony. Yeah, so truncating the link. Anyways, regardless, it's the main point though. Has anyone else submitted? Let's see. A lot of folks from North Carolina. Hello, Ralph, PK, and Steve. Oh, wait, no. They're coming from California. Interesting. I wonder why it's not showing over here. I must have screwed something up on that graph. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Pico. Thank you, PK. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I think I just have some old data or something back there. Anyways, yeah. If we could go back to the deck, there are a couple more just considerations I just want to flag too when making APIs. If you want the pizza, that's the pizza. But authentication is really important with APIs. You want to make sure that the right people can have access to your API, both for asking for data, but also posting data. So one thing is that when you create packages for accessing APIs and that require authentication, make sure to never hard code your API keys, because someone could take them and impersonate you and possibly do bad, evil things. So store them in external files, like on your computer or something, or in your R profile as a global environment variable. This is a nice safeguard. And also when you publish to Git and things like that, then your keys won't go there, which is also good too. For those who don't know, the HTTR package has also a default place for you to put your authorization code in. It's like a hyperparameter called authorization. And the standard format generally is bearer and then your API key. Also, be careful about public APIs. So for this one, it's all fun and games. Also, not many people are posting, mostly due to me a little bit. You don't want people uploading or sending things to your environment that you don't want. So always try to do as much error handling if you have a public API. Then also, if you can do a private API, do that. Posit Connect makes it really easy to create authenticated APIs. All you have to do is, just like on a normal thing or document you publish on Posit Connect, switch the sharing settings to all users login required, and then folks can just use an API key in Posit Connect to authenticate. So as an example, just to show folks, if I wanted to make this one, for example, private, I'll literally just switch it to this, press save, go over here to API keys, and then make a new API key and share it securely. Try not to do it via email, use other tools if possible for folks to get access. So I think that's about it. Hopefully these examples kind of get people more excited about APIs. They're a really great way to both share data, take in data, and just kind of expand your data ecosystem. And we see that we get a final at least bar chart. The bar chart seems to be working. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. Everyone's from the United States so far, but we know I saw some people come from other fun places. So great. That's everything for right now.
Thank you so much, Davis. I think with the example there, it's because I wasn't able to share it through YouTube. Unfortunately, it cuts off the full length, but we will figure out some way. Maybe we could share that through GitHub after with the recording and put it and link it on the YouTube recording. Yeah. But thank you so much. After, let's say, 5 years at Posit, I've spoken with lots and lots of customers and people who are starting to explore using Plumber. And a lot of people had asked about ways other teams have used APIs in production. So it's really awesome to be able to learn about the work your team is doing and see a real life example. So really appreciate you sharing with us. I wanted to remind everybody that we have lots of time for questions here. So I can show this Slido link on the screen. If you want to ask any questions anonymously, you can do so there. Let me copy it over to the chat as well. There are a few that I've seen on YouTube as well, so you can just ask here on YouTube. I see one question that came over from Slido from Eric was, how do you approach debugging complicated unnesting of API results when easy approaches do not work right away?
Yeah, great question. So I try to read the document. If I'm really, really stuck, I try to read the documentation as much as possible, just to sort of see kind of the thought process going in. Another thing too is I really do think that the example I showed with making a tibble and unnesting, there have been very few times where I've run into like serious problems with that. And our internal GraphQL API is really, really complex and really, really nested. So I think if you follow that formula, things should work out pretty well, just with the unnesting wider and longer. And then the third thing too is if you're using like a really common API, another solution, kind of third door, is we use Fivetran internally, which is a great way to just get your data into your data ecosystem pretty easily, just in a standard format. So that's kind of my response.
Great, thank you. Let me jump over to a YouTube question. I see Deepsha had asked, when combining Shiny with API, some API calls can take too long. Have you come across that issue?
I've come across with that just a little bit. So there's a couple of things you can do. One, depending on the API you're pinging, pagination, I'm not sure how folks say it. Some people say pagination, some people say pagination, tomato. Pagination helps. So if you can break up that query into smaller queries, even if the code is less efficient, so even like a dumb map or a dumb for loop of just going through everything just so it's smaller, that'll help a lot too. Also, if it is like a GraphQL API and it does have built-in pagination, that's going to both help if you have internal users, their kind of compute, and also it's going to speed up your time as well. And then as for the APIs that I deploy, I have run into that a couple times. It was actually interesting during the demo. Normally, the Slack API, when it receives calls, expects calls coming in like, I think, a 3-second or like less interval, and it only comes around 4 or 5 seconds. And as a result, it gives like a little like warning, like we're expecting a response. Another thing you can do too is increase the timeout time on your API so it's active more often, and so that it's kind of more awake and can take responses more frequently. However, you will increase your compute depending on where you're hosting your Posit Connect instance.
Thank you. Another question over on Slido, I think, was from PK, and I might need some help understanding what bear tokens are. But the question is, how has your experience been creating APIs that use authentication like bear tokens?
I think bearer. I do like the concept of bear tokens. I'm not sure. Maybe are they actually called bear tokens in some circles? I've never heard that term before, but yeah, as I mentioned before, with Posit Connect is really easy. Outside of Posit Connect, and with Posit Connect, as I mentioned before, it's just switching those sharing settings and sharing like the Posit Connect API key. I even did that just a couple of weeks ago with an external technical stakeholder, and it could not have been easier. Outside of Posit Connect, to borrow the phrase, it's a bear. It's just I never had that full experience before, but just I can't imagine like Docker laid on top of authentication. Depending on which platform you're using, the rules are much more stricter, much more complicated. So I would just say best of luck, and outside of that.
Thank you. Another anonymous question was, can we use or consume pins within a Plumber API?
Absolutely. Yep. For generally, we use BigQuery for our productionalized things. However, for kind of quick and dirty APIs I've made, absolutely love to use pins. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to share a link in the chat too, I think is a helpful example with code as well. Our solutions engineers created this example with bike prediction, but it shows how pins and Plumber, Shiny, and Vetiver are all tied together too.
That's another really cool thing that we're not fully built yet, but we're also using Vetiver and having our modeling be completely off of APIs. Our senior data scientist has been mostly working on this, where we're sending our data to the API and getting the response back and pushing to BigQuery.
That's great. Let me jump back over to YouTube and see. There was a question from Lass. Do you have any experience consuming streaming data with WebSocket protocol in R?
No, actually my experience with streaming is pretty limited, straight up. So no, I do not have that experience, but best of luck. Hopefully some other folks on the chat can help you.
Yeah, and I didn't say that in the beginning, but if you have questions that you have resources to share for, or things that you can help with, feel free to share in the chat as well, and share your own examples there. I see Ralph just asked, when I query APIs, it's often hundreds of calls in a for loop. Any ways to use cleaner code than a big for loop?
Yeah, anytime you're using a for loop, you can probably be doing it in map. The catch with map sometimes, though, is that if you use like a map underscore like a certain format, you might get errors based off of your response not matching that format. So to start with just a raw map, as I kind of showed you, I used that map DFR for that one example, but you can just swap that to a map for your kind of API call function, and that's a bit cleaner than just a for loop. But also, I'm also a fairly big proponent of not for loop shaming. Like, nothing wrong with a for loop. If it works, it works. For loops are readable, but map is generally the cleaner alternative.
Thank you. I'm going to throw a few more questions at you here. I see a few others coming in. I see Lisa had asked and also said, thank you so much, Davis. This helped decomplicate things a bit. How did you become more comfortable with API documentation?
So that's a great question. A little bit of time. So a little bit of over time and space. I personally just find projects where I really understand the API, like what's asking. So I have a set personal project for my fantasy football league where I'm pulling data from the ESPN API to kind of get historical data and modeling for a fantasy football league. That way, when I see the different objects, I know generally what the web UI is like, and kind of generally have a better understanding of the subject matter. So I try not to get bogged down as much with the parts I don't know. That's a really great way to get more familiarity and more experience with APIs. So I'd say just again, like all things, probably not the most helpful answer, but more experience and more practice, and just getting interested in just doing side projects. But there are really tough ones out there too, API. So I definitely don't want to act like I'm the the API paragon at all. But yeah, the main thing is just I also gotta say too, doing it in RStudio and just being able to see the data right there in the list also is a really big help too. So
Awesome. Thank you. I see there were a few there was an anonymous question, a question in the chat about Posit Connect pricing. I just included a link in the chat for the Posit Connect page if you wanted to schedule a call with our team. It can be different depending on the size of your organization. So if you work at a startup versus large organization, and so just wanted to include that link if you want to chat with the team. But also if you're ever curious if your company already has our tools, I've seen so many times where there'll be like a small pocket of data scientists over here and then a team that has the tools on maybe in another country of that company. So if you ever are just curious and want to know, you can reach out to me directly as well. And I'm happy to connect you with your account team too. I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat here as well. Also, feel free to just schedule a call with that link I put in the chat too. Another anonymous question I see, let me just copy it over to the screen here. And it was, what options do you have for API authentication besides Posit Connect? How do you integrate other auth systems with Plumber?
yeah, I wish I had a better answer. I know the way at least I would do it for GCP is I would be looking at ways to get Google's OAuth integrated in there. So I would just start literally Googling like OAuth Plumber. Yeah, but again, that's the thing too I mentioned before is a part of the reason I'm going to be really honest here. Part of the reason I do find this process delightful is because of having the Posit Connect API support. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer. But I would start looking at Google OAuth if you're in GCP. Amazon, I'm not sure what it is. And you can also, there's some really dumb ways you can do it where like a really dumb way to authenticate would to be have a parameter of your request to be authentication, and then probably not secure, probably a terrible idea, but depending on your use case, it might be okay.
You. I can't remember if I asked this question here yet because I didn't check off, but one was, are there specific packages to utilize APIs in Shiny or just HTTR and Shiny reactivity?
I'm sure there are out there. Regardless, I was able to accomplish kind of everything kind of shown in this talk without those. Really, HTTR is the really fundamental one. There are probably other better ones out there, but possibly.
Yep. Thank you, Davis. Let me just double check over on Slido. I don't believe there are any other questions that I may. Oh, let's see. I don't see any other questions coming through, but I'll give everybody a few more seconds if there's anything I missed, if you want to put it back into the YouTube chat as well. And I see somebody commented that my video is fuzzy compared to Davis's side-by-side, so I will look into that. I did host the slides on Restream and publish them up, so maybe that is what's happening. So I will check into it.
I want to give a small shout out to Byron. It looks like in Ecuador. So shout out to Byron.
Are you still seeing results coming
Yeah,
in.
still seeing coming. Also, Kelly in Oregon. Shout out to Kelly. Shout out to Chaz, Florida. Maybe Chase without E, I'm not sure. Yeah, but Byron coming from, I guess that's Ecuador. I'm not quite sure. That'll be my guess.
Well, there actually was a question before if you could share this code. Is that something you were planning to do?
It's not going to be the most useful because I am running to our BigQuery environment. So I can swap out with pins just so folks can use it. The problem with pins, though, is that you have to like rip and replace the pins. So I don't want something weird happening with multiple people using it. Yeah, but I'll swap this out with pins and I can share this. And I can also absolutely share the aviation code I shared before.
Perfect. Yeah, and I will share these links that have been mentioned in the chat, and then the code once Davis shares it with me with the YouTube recording. And so just wanted to remind everybody that the YouTube recording will be at the same link that you watched it from today. But thank you all so much for spending time with us today and spending with us at all the meetups the past year. I can't believe this is the last one of the year. Wishing you all happy holiday season and happy new year. We do have our last data science hangout of the year this Thursday. So there's one more community event. So if you are interested in joining us at that, JJ Lair, founder and CEO of Posit, will be joining us this week. And so I will put the link in the chat right now where you can add that to your calendar too. Thank you again, Davis, for an awesome presentation.
Thank you so much, Rich, for having us, and hope everyone has a great holiday season.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.